They say the fellow was swifter than a bullet from a Tommy gun, tougher than a steel-driven engine, and could hop over skyscrapers like a jackrabbit on springs. But just who is this Superman? And say, what's the big idea with wearing his unmentionables on the outside? Welcome, folks, to another fine installment of Therapy and Panels. Back in the frosty days of January 1933, a bright young lad named Jerry Siegel penned a curious tale called The Reign of the Supermen. With pictures by his old pal Joe Shuster, the yarn was printed in a homegrown sci-fi magazine. But this Superman wasn't the Kid Crusader we know today. No, sir. He was a bald-headed menace with powers of the mind and a taste for villainy. But the boys had bigger dreams. They figured, what if this Superman fella was a hero instead? Someone from another world, packed with power, fighting the good fight. And just like that, a legend began to take shape. They pitched their newfangled comic strip to newspaper syndicates far and wide, but not a one bit. Then came National Comics, hungry for a new smash to follow up their hit Detective Comics. With the clock ticking and no time to waste, editor Vin Sullivan needed pages, and fast. A lucky find of those old Superman strips caught his eye. Sullivan made the call, patch it together into 13 pages, and we'll run it as the lead. And just like that, history was made. Gather round, friends, as we step back in time and crack open the pages of Action Comics #1, the birth cry of the superhero genre. Now, don't get your hopes up, folks. This here's just a facsimile. If it were the genuine article, I'd be cashing it in quicker than a bank run. But even as a reprint, this covers a real humdinger, an icon of the golden age. Still, I gotta chuckle. Looking at these with fresh eyes, if I were some fella back in 38, I wouldn't be thinking hero, I'd be thinking this guy's a menace. Smashing cars, sending fellas running for the hills, he looks more like public enemy #1. And just take a gander at the mug on that poor sap in the corner, eyes bugging out. Pure panic. That face says it all, pals. It's the kind of over-the-top drama that makes these old covers such a hoot. As a distant world meets its end, crumbling under the weight of its own age. Because yes, folks, even planets have a shelf life. A lone scientist makes a desperate gamble. Into a space capsule he places his infant son, and with a flash of hope and heartbreak, he launches the child across the stars, straight toward Earth. The capsule crash lands, and who should find it but a passing motorist? His first instinct? Why, to drop the baby off at an orphanage. Obviously, that timeline's version of not my problem. The orphanage attendants, gobsmacked by the boy's superhuman feats, gobsmacked by the superhuman child, but not gobsmacked enough to alert the authorities, newspapers, or even the circus. Nope, they just treat it as another day at the orphanage. Kids these days, am I right? The child is named Clark Kent. He can bound over buildings, hoist steel like it's straw, and race a locomotive without breaking a sweat. Not to mention bullets bounce off him like spitballs. Realizing he's not your average Joe, Clark dedicates himself to a noble cause, fighting for truth, justice, and the oppressed as Superman. His first big case, a gal named Evelyn Curry, set to fry for a murder she didn't commit. How do we know she's innocent? Well, because I'm Superman, that's why. Superman sniffs out the real culprit, hogties her like yesterday's bandit, and drops her, bound and gagged, on the governor's doorstep. Hands down the worst cab drive of her life. Breaks down the door and gives the governor the old red-eyed stare and somehow convinces him to stop the execution. I say convinces, but let's be honest. If a flying straw man kicks in your door, you're gonna want to listen to what he says also. Back at the Daily Star, Clark gets a real humdinger of an assignment. Cover Superman. Yep, nothing suspicious about writing puff pieces about yourself. I smell a Pulitzer from this one. He catches wind of a domestic dispute, sprints over, switches to the tights, and stops a would-be killer in the nick of time. Are newspapers really covering wife beaters back then? Guess it was a slow news day. Clark then shoots his shot with Lois Lane, who says yes. Probably out of pity, but hey, a date's a date. During a dance, some mook named Butch tries to cut in. Clark plays the meek milk stop to protect his secret, and Lois, fed up with the testosterone, slaps Butch and walks out like a queen. Butch, a true sore loser, kidnaps her. Superman gives chase, crumbles their getaway car like a tin can, and scoops Lois into his arms. Now, a reminder for all of you, he couldn't fly back then, so picture a heroic series of power hops through the city, like a gazelle in red boots. Lois is starry-eyed, but come morning, she's colder to Clark than ever. Funny how he looks like Superman, but that's none of her business, apparently. Next up, Clark sent to San Monet, a war-torn South American republic. Because when you need international war coverage, you go to the guy who covers wife beatings. But first, he hits Washington, D.C., where lobbyist Alex Greer is trying to sweet-talk Senator Barrows into starting a war with Europe. The man's just doing his job, trying to get the U.S. in the war to stop Hitler early, but Superman apparently is having none of that. Grabs Greer, scales the Capitol building like King Kong in a cape, and threatens to chug him off if he doesn't spill. Ending the story. And that, folks, is how Action Comics #1 ends. The dawn of a new age, the first flight, hop of Superman. My diagnosis, it's a wild, pulpy, and absurd, and it's absolutely golden. There were a few oddities, chalk them up to the times, but let's set those aside for now. You see, back when most heroes were busy solving cozy mysteries or swinging from ropes like dime store Tarzans, along comes Superman, lifting sedans over his head and chucking crooked politicians like yesterday's trash. With whiplash pacing, punchy illustrations, and a clear-cut sense of right and wrong, this wasn't just a ripping yarn, it was the birth cry of an entire genre. The superhero had landed, and the world would never be the same. And with that, folks, we draw the curtain on today's session. Much obliged for tuning in. If this little broadcast tickled your fancy, do us a thumbs up, jot down a comment, and subscribe for more high-flying adventures. Until next time, I remain your humble host, the Super Guru, signing off.